just thought that was the worst call of the year. That's all.
We're not going to make promises, but I tell you this.
Yeah, I'm about to get wild. I know that. Let's get wild.
I'm not answer anybody's question but yours. But you're an idiot. And really disloyal.
This is a safe space for all basketball rims who have to feel the wrath of William Kyle III in the coming days and months. Welcome, everyone, to the Disloyal Idiots podcast here on the Fans First Sports Network. Christian Guzman here with Andy Pregler. No Steve Howler this week, which is good because we don't have any offensive linemen to talk about. But it's also bad because we don't have any offensive linemen to talk about.
Yeah, after we spent last week's show talking about all the transfer portal needs and wants and desires, there's been a lot of transfer portal news, and we'll get to that, but none of them have been on the side of the line in the trenches that we all three identified as please do something. So right now we are all the stick meme poking at Fran and the offensive line team saying, please do something. But that is a conversation for a later time.
Indeed. And before we get to all the transfer portal news, which we all know that's what Andy and I are really here to talk about, we might as well eat our vegetables first and talk about Syracuse basketball and the unfortunate things that William Kyle does to people in front of the rim.
Yeah, the nice thing about this basketball run that we had talked about last show was that Syracuse was going to have two games against teams that we expected to be in the bottom half of the ACC. Both of those games were going to be on the road, and both of those games were going to potentially be tricky, but should be Syracuse wins if they were going to be the team that we thought they could be with Donnie Freeman. The answer to these questions and to these hypotheticals that we had is that Syracuse is exactly who we thought they were. They played a Georgia Tech team who was down their best player coming into the game and down their second best player for a good chunk of the first half. That game got squirrely and weird, but they came away with a win, much in large part thanks to Donnie Freeman. And in the Pitt game, it was very clear that everybody knows that Donnie Freeman is the good player, and Syracuse needed somebody else besides Donnie to step up. And boy, oh boy, did William Kyle do his best to step up and destroy rims as Syracuse defeated Pitt at the Peterson Events Center, which has been a house of horrors for Syracuse basketball this last decade. And the Orange somehow are 2-0, back up into the 60s in KenPom, back up into the 60s of net. This is about the best case scenario that you could have asked for this week when you look at Syracuse basketball. And it is in large part thanks to the two members of the Syracuse front court.
And the best part for the Cades is that Syracuse's net ranking is 67. I am absolutely not joking about this, so congratulations to everyone.
Oh, jeez.
Yep.
God, I okay.
I hate it too.
Yep,
I
great.
hate it too.
We all hate it.
Mm-hmm.
The Christian, which of these games did you think was the more? They were both frustrating at times, but which of these games did you think was the more interesting game?
Neither, because both of them were the exact same game. Because you could have just repeated what you said about the Georgia Tech game for the Pitt game, because Pitt doesn't have their best player either, because I forget who it was, their transfer from Iowa State. He's been out for the entire season and won't play the entire season due to an injury. And, Jeff Capel has said that has drastically changed how he wants his team to play. And so Syracuse goes up by 20 against both programs. And suddenly, in the middle of the second half, Syracuse decides they want to start turning the ball over a lot and reduce the lead to single digits to make Syracuse fans squirrely, and then slowly pull away in the final minutes to eventually squeak out a double-digit win that doesn't feel like a squeaked-out double-digit win when you take into context the final minutes of the second half. So you would like to win those games a bit more comfortably, i.e. hold on to the 20-point leads that you had in both games. So it's hard to say which one is more interesting because, like I said, I think they were both exactly the same game. And if you just look at the box score and as the scoreline, they were essentially the same game because Syracuse wins at Georgia Tech 82-72 and Syracuse wins at Pitt 83-72. So
The interesting thing that you say about this is that both games also featured Syracuse jumping out to a hot start, though in two very different ways, in my opinion. Obviously, the defense in both games in the first half was very strong, but against Pitt, I saw transition offense for the first time in a long while. And a lot of that was due to William Kyle and Donnie Freeman being super aggressive. A lot of that was due to Nate George getting far more involved in the defensive side of the game. All things that we've been kind of waiting for. And to be honest, I didn't think Syracuse had that level of transition in their game, but a team that wants to run fast and play hard should be good in transition. And in fact, Syracuse was good in transition. Georgia Tech was a little bit more of actually realizing, hey, the kick and shoot game works when you have William Kyle and Donnie Freeman. That is the way to win the half court, and they were just making their shots at a rather unsustainable clip. Obviously, they regressed hard to the mean in the second half of that game, but there's promising signs of life on the offensive side of the ball when you look at these two games. The issue that I had, and I think it's probably the issue that everybody had here, in the Pitt game, William Kyle got into foul trouble and had to get pulled pretty early on. Obviously, when he was in, he was impactful, but the foul trouble really did impact him. And against Georgia Tech, you saw a team that very quickly adapted to the kick and shoot game, and Syracuse not really have any answers and revert. And in both games, without what was working, they immediately reverted back into their worst form of offense, which was standing around, ISO ball with players who can't play ISO ball, long threes and long twos from players who should not be taking long threes and long twos. And it's difficult to look at these games and say that Syracuse has fixed anything, but it is also difficult to look at these games and say, this is a worse Syracuse team than what we had at the beginning of the season.
No, definitely not. And I think it shows the proof in the pudding for both games shows what impact Donnie has on the floor. Because when you have Donnie on the floor, he obviously likes to play inside, but he's definitely a stretch four. Because, I mean, we saw it in the Pitt game. He can knock down threes, long twos, whatever you want. Like, he can spread out the floor on the offense, and it makes the spacing on the offensive end a lot easier. You don't have two guys who are primary paint guys on the floor most times now when you have Donnie on the floor. When you had Sadiq White in the lineup, Sadiq hasn't quite developed that mid-range to outside game yet, and I don't think he is that player. So that meant you really had him and Kyle, dominating the paint a lot, and that made spacing a little bit weird. But now when you have Donnie on the floor, it allows for more creative spacing options on the floor to open up, different kick and shoot looks as well. And of course, the Pitt game, you could say, is probably the more interesting one if you really want to go back to that first question, just because it shows that Syracuse can make threes. That was such a huge topic of conversation for Syracuse this entire season, that this was a team that had some good 3-point shooters but weren't going down, and the proof is here that, hey, Syracuse, you give them an opportunity, they can make threes. I think the big thing is showing what this offense can look like with Donnie Freeman on the floor, and that's the most important part for a Syracuse program that was obviously not happy with how the offense was looking when Donnie was out due to injury.
Yeah, and I think that at the beginning of the season, there was the belief that Donnie would not need to be as important because of Sadiq White and because of other players in the front court. And what we have seen is that while there are pieces in that front court, the reality is that it is the William Kyle and Donnie Freeman show up there. And this team's best version of itself is with those two playing at minimum 30 minutes a night and staying mostly out of foul trouble. And that is a tall thing to ask. And we have seen that teams that are led by dominant front court players sometimes struggle later in the season and in March when the whistles get tighter. But I think for now, it is important that we see Syracuse figure out ways to make this offense work with those two players in a variety of different ways. One thing that I will say that I did not expect about Freeman's game that has been very pleasant is his ability to hit open shots. Freeman is not somebody like Kyle's biggest deficiency is that he cannot shoot the ball from anywhere that is not directly on the glass or around the rim. Which is fine because as we saw in the Pitt game, he is absolutely lethal in that area. And it does not matter if you put a guy on him, he will probably find a way to dunk over you. But because of his free throw shooting, you want to have somebody down there and potentially, foul him onto the line. Donnie Freeman, rather, is a completely different player in that regard, where he is somebody that you have to watch all over the half court because he has the ability to hit an open three. He has the ability to hit a long two. He has the ability to drive off of a ISO and get to the rim and put up a high percentage shot. He's a very, very, very complete player who might not be the most refined and might not be able to lead this team deep into a March run, but he is a focal point of this offense, which can hopefully, as we saw against Georgia Tech and as we saw a little bit against Pitt, can allow for other guards to step up and have a good offensive game without being the focal point of the offense. And against Georgia Tech, it was Nate George who really capitalized on that. Against Pitt, we saw a few other complementary guards really step up and take on point scoring responsibilities when Donnie Freeman was grabbing the majority of the attention of the Pitt defense.
So here's the funny thing. I've for those who don't know, part of my other job is helping ESPN with stats for Syracuse basketball games, especially the Q's control room and their production room there for Syracuse. I've been lately tracking JJ Starling this season, specifically when he makes and misses his first field goal, because it feels. I don't think it's a mystery to anyone that watches Syracuse to know that JJ is a confident shooter. This year, JJ has played 14 games. He's missed his first field goal in 8 of those games. And in those 8 games, he's averaging 8.9 points and a 36 field goal percentage. In the games where he makes his first field goal, he's made 6 of those and played in 6 of those games, and he averages 14 points and 51% field goal percentage. So it's quite significant for JJ to get going early and to see that first bucket fall very, very early. And we saw that, both numbers correlate to the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech, I don't believe he made his first field goal, or he might have. No, he did not make his first field goal, and he goes 2 for 10 in that game, and only scores 8 points. Against Pitt, he makes his first field goal, and what happens? He goes 7 of 11 from the floor and scores 19 points. So, a lot of people probably into the season obviously see Donnie and JJ coming back, and those are the key points of the program. JJ has to continue to help pull his weight as well, and you could see it, especially during the Clemson game. If JJ isn't helping with the scoring, besides, it's very easy to focus on Donnie because there's not a lot of other options that can do it, at least in those late game scenarios, that can help Syracuse win.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about the JJ Starling dynamic here, it's important because when you look at this Georgia Tech and Pitt result as like one giant 80-minute competition, which I kind of am, because I do think that like we mentioned off the top, not only were both games played in a very similar fashion, but I think all things considered, Georgia Tech and Syracuse are probably, or Georgia Tech and Pitt rather, are going to end up in similar positions along the ACC standings. They played kind of similar games as well. They have very similar roster dynamics. And you would expect Syracuse to attack both of these games fundamentally similarly from a game planning perspective. And I say all that to say, Kyan Anthony got run in the Georgia Tech game. He played 18 minutes, only played 10 minutes in the Pitt game. And that was because he went 0 for 1 on the field. He made his 2 free throws that he got sent to the line for, versus but that was a game where JJ was playing incredibly well, as Christian just mentioned. In the Georgia Tech game, JJ Starling played 28 minutes, went 2 of 10 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3, for a grand total of 8 points, with half of those coming from the charity stripe. That was a game where Kyan played 18 minutes and went 4 of 9 from the field and was 50% from behind the arc, 2 of 4 from 3. It's really obvious that Kyan is not going to be the quote unquote first name off the bench. Ibrahim Sore and Sadiq White are probably the first 2 names to come off again because of that front court rotation, just due to fouls and making sure that Donnie and Kyle can, stay out of foul trouble and stay fresh for second halves of games. But if JJ doesn't get going, Kyan is there to essentially play the JJ role, but both of them are very much vibes and streaky shooters. And again, there are going to be games, and we have seen it happen, where neither can get it going. And then you're really looking at a Tyler Betsy, who played 14 minutes against Pitt. Bryce Zephyr got a charity moment against Georgia Tech, but there's really not anybody else that you can really look at to kind of pick things up. And so again, I think that even though Syracuse is not playing a Jim Boeheim level rotation here, it's really clear that for Syracuse to be successful, one of JJ or Kyan has to get hot. And by hot, it's make your first shot, get into rhythm, and not force things, because both players will force things if they don't feel successful very early on. That's not ideal, but if we go back to what we kind of mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, talking about the basketball team, when Syracuse is playing well, they're getting out to hot starts because of aggressive defensive play, leading to transition or leading to half courts where they can run easy kick and shoots. Those are scenarios in which both Kyan and JJ have shown they can thrive. It's going to be tougher to do so against ACC opposition, but that is a recipe where they can both get hot. So when you're looking at what Syracuse's game plan is, I don't think it's going to vary all that much differently from what we've seen this week. I think that we now know what a good Syracuse game will look like, and it's going to look a lot like what we saw against Georgia Tech and Pitt in the first halves of those games.
The other big thing to that as well is right now you've got to play Kyan in the correct moments and against the correct opposition as well. Because what we saw from Pitt, one of the big reasons why Pitt, sparks that comeback is that Brandon Cummings gets going off the bench. And a large part of that is that they started to attack the Kyan matchup. And Kyan defensively just isn't there yet. And that's okay. But that's what you get with playing him on the floor right now. He's got the offensive potential, but just defensively, Pitt noticed it and Cummings got hot because of it. So you've got to be careful there. Also, my other thing, Nate George stopped shooting threes. I think George takes threes at the worst times. I know he can make some of them, but a lot of them are just not at the right moments. He should be, if he's going to be in his scoring guard moments, he's got to be driving, because he's very effective in that, and he draws fouls and makes free throws. So, that, if George needs to be that other guard, if JJ and Kyan aren't going, like in the Georgia Tech game, what we saw, he went and drove to the hoop, and 10 of his 17 points comes at the free throw line. So that's what Nate George has to be in terms of if he's going to be the scoring support from the guard position that Syracuse needs if JJ and Cayenne aren't getting it going.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, because the elephant in the room here is that in the two opening conference games, the one player who we haven't mentioned of the starting five is the guy that we expected to be mentioning a lot more coming into the season, and that's Nate Kings. Played 37 minutes against Georgia Tech, played 25 minutes against Pitt, a lot of minutes, and in all of those minutes, he got 14 points. Only hit 2 threes on 9 attempts in those two combined efforts. And his percentage from the field was not much better. 3 for 8 against Georgia Tech and 2 for 6 against Pitt. But those are numbers that are just simply not going to cut it from the player that was supposed to be the two guard for Syracuse. He's not big enough to be a traditional scoring wing, even in, the small ball era of college basketball that we can sometimes see ourselves in. He is not a liability on defense, which is why I think you're seeing him get as many minutes and as many opportunities as he can. But I think what we are seeing is that Nate Kings is not going to be the knock it down 3-point specialist that was promised. Nate Kings is going to be the very reliable, above average defensive 2 guard who can take enough shots to keep the defense honest on him. But he very clearly either, one, cannot sustain this level of defensive pressure and also be good offensively, or 2, what was his last season at Oregon State, where he was, playing, it said 31 games, 27 minutes per game, 50% from the field, 44% from 3, averaging 11 points a game. Like that version of him is not walking through this door without a massive regression to the mean. And what I have seen from just the eye test, it's not there. Like he's just not going to be that player for us. And it's somewhat disheartening, but at the same time, as we've talked about it now, like, look, there are other guards that can step up a bit, but it does mean, to Christian, to piggyback off of the last point that you mentioned about the 3-point shooting from our one guard, it does mean that this team really does not have a way to consistently hit 3-point shots and either come back from large deficits or, as we saw in these 2 games, put away blowouts by just hitting dagger 3s consistently. Like, this is just not going to be, that's just not a tool belt that is in the repertoire of this team.
You want something fun?
Well, I would like something fun. I would not like something that is borderline depressing that you're masquerading as fun.
So Nate Kings on the Syracuse men's basketball roster on Cuse.com is listed at 6'5", 190 pounds. Ironically, that is the same exact height and weight as someone else. Who else? Who is it, Andy?
JJ Starling?
No, it's Calvin Russell III.
Ah, wow. Yeah, we should probably talk about that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we should.
For those of you who might not have been on social media these last few days, congratulations. You're probably a happier person than I am.
Yeah. Congratulations on a much better life than a lot of people right now.
Yeah, exactly. But for you guys who don't know, Calvin Russell, the borderline 5-star wide receiver who's coming into the Syracuse football program, is an early enrollee. Fantastic for the football team. He's also now officially on the basketball roster. It got released earlier this week that Calvin Russell was going to be practicing with the basketball team and be on the basketball team at some point this semester. Did not realize it was going to be taking place as quickly as it did, but it has taken place. I'm not gonna lie. There is a part of me. Syracuse has had a long history of football players playing on the basketball team, most notably Donovan McNabb and Dwight Freeney.
I am
come
literally
to
typing
mind.
in Donovan McNabb Syracuse basketball stats.
Exactly. I think that is like the most obvious comp here. But Calvin Russell is a different type of body and is a different type of player. The fun part is that right now I am attempting to find his basketball stats.
It's on the
and
thankfully the Syracuse athletics release has basketball stats for his past 3 seasons. And so his final year, which was ironically his junior year of basketball last year with Miami Northwestern, he averages 15.2 points, 8 rebounds, and a block and a third per game. His sophomore year was his best year scoring wise, 21 points per game. But in total, he averages over 15 points per game in each of his 3 seasons as a basketball player with Miami Northwestern, and averages 6 or more rebounds per game per season with Miami Northwestern.
I'm reading the bottom part of this. Did you read the last graph in his player bio?
Indeed. His mom is a Miami Sports Hall of Famer and played basketball with the Hurricanes, Miami, Florida, and she scored over 1,400 points and is third on Miami's all-time blocks list with 132.
Look, not trying to play Madden, whatever it was that had that ridiculous. I don't know if you know about this, Christian, but there was a Madden game that had the first ever be a pro mode in Madden. You would pull, instead of being able to pick your sliders for your skills, you got randomly assigned based off of your position, height, weight, and then the wild card was you would pull a random lever and it would determine your mom and your dad's careers and athletic history, and your stats would be determined based off of that.
Yep.
That's
more realistic than most right now.
It was absolutely wild that there was a level of eugenics to a Madden video game, but it existed, and I have played that game a lot. But this is so I'm not trying to do that here with Russell, but what I will say, dude has a fantastic basketball coach at home. And he might be better than I thought he was going to be, is the nice way of saying that. Mostly because a lot of times when this happens, like we saw with Donovan McNabb was a very talented basketball player and got courtesy runs, but did have some big games where he came in due to foul trouble, most notably against Georgetown. Do not remember what year it was, but that was a thing that happened. And I'm interested to see what Calvin Russell can do now, because I would like, I kind of, putting a bow on this entire conversation. You made a face, for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, you made a face when I said Tyler Betsy. And Betsy has been a nice forward for Syracuse, but he's kind of played like a guard.
No, absolutely.
And I'm kind of with you where he is kind of the embodiment of everything I hate about modern basketball. Where, dude, you are bigger than some of the people you're matched up against. Stop trying to be Steph Curry. So he's just somebody that I don't love his game right now. Like that's the nicest way that I can say that.
I do like it more than Kings right now, honestly, because I think Kings might be in his own head a little bit just because the shots aren't falling. I like seeing Betsy hunt for a shot, and also I think Betsy has a better drive game as well. I'm liking Betsy more and more. So, and also just because of the height and just because of how he naturally plays, he will get into size mismatches and can shoot over people. So I think for Betsy, it's going to be, I think he'll get a lot more run. Defensively, I just haven't paid as much attention to him. So I'm not sure, like, defensively how he's doing. But offensively, even though he doesn't get as many chances, I feel like he's got more opportunities offensively to impact the game than other players. And just to put the whole bow on the basketball conversation, you already mentioned Red is starting to shorten his bench. So I don't think we'll see Russell a lot but it's just a fun thing to have as football comes along as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see, like, to be completely honest, because one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about last week, and we're going to continue to talk about it through the entire month of January, so apologies if this gets old, but the next 1, 2, 3 games are over the next 2 weeks are great opportunities for Syracuse to try to improve here. They play a struggling Florida State team at home on the 13th. So that's Tuesday night. And then they play
before you move on, everyone set your coffee mugs and alarms because that's another 9:00 tip for Syracuse on Tuesday.
Jeez. Okay, I know why they're doing it, and we can talk about that also in the next segment because that came out this week. But like, I hate this so much. And Syracuse also plays the absolutely deplorable Boston College. It is in Chestnut Hill, so like I don't want to downplay sometimes when Boston College does dumb things against Syracuse, but they are playing a very bad Boston College team this week.
Here's how bad that Boston College game is. For Syracuse, that's a quad 3 game.
Ooh. Going on the road in the ACC and it being a quad 3 game is we have to have a conversation here. We do have to talk about this.
And just so you know, that Georgia Tech game right now, if Georgia Tech improves, maybe it happens. Cool. But right now, that Georgia Tech game is also a quad 3 game.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Pitt also ends up being a quad 3 game by the time that this season is over.
Yeah, Pitt's about 20 or so rankings dropping to being a quad 3 game right now.
Which I did not see if you did not read the Syracuse Pitt preview on our sister site Noon's Magician,
it's great.
Pitt is not feeling it right now. Reminder, everybody, it can always get worse. And so the reason I say this is like these next 2 games, those are those are gimme games, and then after that starts the stretch. And I think I'm just going to call it that because that's when the season, in my opinion, actually starts, and every game is lock it in. It's going to be tough. We're going to win some that we feel good about. We're going to lose some that we feel really annoyed by. And that's going to determine whether this team is on the bubble or not.
After the Boston College game, every opponent until the last opponent of the season, which is Pitt, is at least 75 in the net.
Yeah. And if you go on KenPom, I think the worst one on KenPom is Cal, who is 82nd. So that it's, again, the net and KenPom are getting closer and closer now, which is always very, very helpful.
Yeah, Cal is right now at 72 in the net.
Yeah, so there we go. It's going to be that's where we figure out what this team is, and that's why I think it's interesting this week when we talk about the Calvin Russell of it all. I do not expect him to get serious minutes at any point this season unless, break glass in case of emergency. What I do expect is that if Syracuse can get out to a big enough lead in any of these 2 games, maybe you throw Russell out there and just see what he has, especially in a game where maybe Kyan and JJ are not doing much of anything.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, but I don't think it's Red's definitely shorting the bench. And
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what I agree with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe that helps Syracuse more offensively. I think a lot of it is just Donnie coming back to the lineup. I mean, crunching the numbers, Syracuse is averaging 7 more points and shooting 6% better from the field when Donnie's in the lineup, which is significant.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like another name that we did not mention here, Montana. I want to make sure that's Montana State. Yeah, Montana State transfer Bryce Zephyr. His minutes have completely fallen off a cliff. Like he's the senior is just not going to be playing right now.
Yeah.
So, I think that look at that, Christian. We gave 34 minutes to basketball. Who says that we don't cover basketball on the Syracuse podcast? I don't know what you're talking about, internet.
Probably a lot of people.
That's true. I think the next thing that we should talk about one of the things that was alluded to in this conversation that we just talked about was Syracuse is playing at 9 p.m. Against Florida State. And I think that there's been a lot of conversations as to why the hell is Syracuse playing all of these games at 9 p.m. And there's a very specific reason for that. The ACC changed its television rules this year as part of that settlement with Clemson and the Florida State potentially leaving lawsuit. And what happened as part of that lawsuit is that the television ratings matter now. Essentially, your conference payout is directly determined by how many people watch you, which is why Syracuse did that very annoying every Cuse click counts campaign that they launched and then promptly forgot about. But look, tell me I'm wrong. But it is very important because the ACC did release its TV viewership numbers for football only. And this is really important. Basketball has not yet factored into these numbers. The final tally for the ACC will be across all sports, not just football. And that's really important. That is because Syracuse in the ACC finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in the conference in average viewership. They were below in order: Miami, who was 1, Georgia Tech 2, Clemson 3, FSU 4, Virginia 5, Pitt 6, North Carolina 7, Syracuse 8. Now, this is why I'm bringing this up with basketball. Georgia Tech played a lot of weekday night football and played a lot of late night isolated window football games this year. That was done by choice because Georgia Tech looked at the data and said, even though it's super annoying, we still have a loyal core base that will show up for this game no matter what. They only come out, the casual fans only come out if it's a massive opponent that we are playing on the schedule. It doesn't matter if we're winning or losing. It just matters that of the name of the opponent. So for us, playing those games in annoying time slots are the best way for us to get viewership because those games just get put on TVs at bars everywhere. They just get put on in houses everywhere. And all of a sudden, you've juiced your numbers, even though you might not be the most popular team in the conference when you have to compete with everything else that goes on in a crowded window. And for Syracuse, I think that they are playing that game with basketball since basketball is our primary sport as opposed to football. And again, this is just my hypothesis here, but it does, following the data seems to be lining this up, but it does look as if Syracuse is opting into a lot of these 9 p.m. games in order to get television viewership, which is annoying. But like, Christian, you know it as well as I do. Like, more people are willing to inconvenience themselves for basketball than football at this point in time.
Yeah, especially in Syracuse. I mean, I'm of the opinion, and you know this, I'm not sure if you share your opinion. I've made it clear on this podcast that, you know, Syracuse has got to shift more towards football now in order just to stay and compete. But right now, obviously, since basketball is still in that vein of a popular enough sport at Syracuse where it's worth investing into, so that means including the upcoming Florida State game, you still have 3 more 9 p.m. tips coming this year. The Florida State game next week, even against Virginia Tech at home, and then later this season, second to last game at Louisville. So you've got, you want to be on TV, like, because that's really where the clicks matter. You're not getting a big viewership number if the game is streaming only. While it's convenient to have the game on a stream, you'd much rather it be on TV. So yes, it's inconvenient. Yeah, it is very inconvenient. It really, really sucks. But just based on how the ACC is now, especially with that payout structure, you need to get the eyeballs on it. And also shout out to Miami for taking literally all the playoff money.
Yeah, yeah. Miami is, look, the game is the game. And right now the ACC is saying we're not going to die. We're not going down quietly. But actually, you kind of mentioned something here, Christian, about that allocation. That is a decision that is going to continually be made at the highest levels of leadership at Syracuse. And this is not sports specific news, but there was a massive piece of news that came out this weekend that is probably going to have a massive impact on the athletic department.
Literally today, or the day we're recording this on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, the Kent Syverud had announced back in August that he was going to step down at the end of the academic year. That kind of level of lead is not unexpected for a chancellor search. There's a firm involved, there's a process involved, there's committees involved. It's higher ed. It's going to take a while. What was not expected was the news that came out today from the University of Michigan. Yes, that University of Michigan. They have been in an interim president search they've had an interim president for a while, and they've had a very long ongoing search. And if you did not know anything about Michigan and you live under a rock, they have been dealing with a lot of scandals across their athletic department that have made this decision very important. And they will confirm tomorrow at their Board of Regents special meeting that Kent Syverud will be leaving Syracuse and becoming the president of Michigan. It does not officially say when, but he will be formally elected at 1 p.m. Monday, January 12th. My assumption is that if he's formally elected, he will be leaving the Syracuse University campus fairly quickly in order to preside over Ann Arbor as soon as possible. You live in Syracuse. Like this came out of left field. This was not rumored in any way, shape, or form. But two, this is massive for the leadership structure at Syracuse because at the end of the day, the chancellor does have a large say over athletics because technically the athletic director reports to the chancellor. The John Wildhack decision was made by Syverud and Syverud himself. But this past year, there was a special assistant brought in to it's unclear if she sits between Syverud and Wildhack or if she is adjacent to Wildhack reporting directly to Syverud. But Heather Lyle, the former athletic director of Pitt, was brought in very quietly at the beginning of this year. And for better or for worse, what I think we are going to see over these next few months is changes across the athletic department. Because much like when there is a new athletic director and every coach starts looking at themselves and going, oh, wait, I'm not your guy. The same thing happens when there's a new university president or chancellor. The athletic director looks at every other department head and they all go, oh, wait a minute, I'm not your guy. And there is typically change on the horizon.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm not sure. This is always so tough administratively because they're obviously, like, the big thing is, like, obviously coaching wise is going to come up. And you would assume that some of these coaching decisions that are coming up, at least the major ones for Syracuse's major sports, and the major sports at Syracuse are the dome sports. I mean, whether you like it or not, they are. Like, there have definitely been some good and bad with that as well. Obviously, we think the Fran Brown hire has been very, very good. Right now, the Autry hire is still yet to be determined. The Felicia Leggett-Jack hire has been very, very good. We thought the Kayla Trainer hire was good. And we'll see how good the Gary Gate hire is this season, because really, I think this season might be make or break for Gary. In that sense, for men's lacrosse, obviously, it's Syracuse's best chance to win a national championship in God knows how long. But it's interesting to see how you would judge, if you're a new chancellor coming in, how you judge Wildhack's performance in that regard. It's really tough to say if you want to keep him or not, especially just because, again, Wildhack does have not just the coaching background as well. The you can't put away the TV background that Wild Hack has as well. Like that's an important part of the athletic directorship that he brings as well. And at least from what I've seen, Syracuse has done a much better job these past couple of years, at least, engaging media wise. I mean, Wild Hack created like Syracuse's ACC network production in Newhouse, or at least I would assume he did, because those the people who are full time members of that production crew at Syracuse's ACC network hub are Syracuse athletic members. So like he's responsible for creating that, and obviously any game that's on ACC network, unless it's a major ESPN game, is run out of that Newhouse production studio. So like that impact as well is very, very important, especially with how Syracuse fits in the media landscape as well, both of us being Newhouse alums, and how important that is to the demeanor or I would say the image of Syracuse. I mean, you look at it with Matt Park winning New York State Broadcaster of the Year this year, Sean McDonough winning MSMA Sportscaster of the Year, both Syracuse alums. Mike Tirico is going to be calling the Super Bowl and then hosting the Olympics again. Like a lot of that, media support also comes from Wild Hack just based on his media experience being, in the ESPN world for a while. So athletically, choosing coaches and all, it's interesting. You can have arguments here and there of whether it's been a success or not. But the undoubted media success definitely plays a factor in this as well, and just the media relationship you have with Syracuse as well.
Exactly. And there's so much in terms of the process of hiring coaches and these behind the scenes stuff that we are just not privy to and don't get written about at Syracuse as much as other places because of it being a private university and because it's much harder to obtain official communication records as compared to a public university. So a lot of that stuff is, rumored, but not official. What I do think is interesting here is that the timing does benefit Syracuse's current situation in that if the search committee that is looking for a new chancellor has a name, you can now make an offer right now and say, hey, look, I know we had maybe been working off of a timeline for July. Do you want to start now? Like you can get a name in quicker. And that is important because it will give that person time to work with Wild Hack on what is the future plan here. Is the plan for there to be a change made in the next 2 to 5 years or sooner? Or is there a plan to say like, nope, we want to stick with you? Because at the end of the day, the reason that this is important, 2030 is the benchmark for when all of this is going to fundamentally change. That is when either we are getting a super league where the college football playoff is the Super League and everybody else is the rest of the NCAA, or if we are going to continue to exist for a 10 to 15 year period as things are now, where the conferences still kind of exist as a 4 or 5 way entity that control the power of athletics. And all of that is, as Christian alluded to, like this is all TV related, and Wild Hack is a navigator of that space. But it is ultimately there's a big decision Syracuse has to make, which is how much do you invest in basketball versus football with the limited NIL funds and revenue sharing funds that Syracuse has. Because unlike some other schools in the ACC, like, for example, Duke has very clearly decided to lean all in on football with its official money and then go and say, we're going to lean on our donors and our wealth of NBA superstars to fund the basketball team as like it basically is an independent entity away from football. Syracuse could do that, but basketball does not nearly have the base necessary to compete with Duke. And I think if you were to go around and ask the average person in Syracuse fans want to compete with Duke. We want to be on that level. You look at the Big East schools. You look at what's happening in the Big 12. Schools are deciding to allocate more than $5 million a year towards their basketball program, some of which are allocating $10 million a year towards their basketball program. Syracuse is not going to be able to do that and allocate the maximum amount of funds to football. And so I think that is the big, the reason that this is so important is because that is the big decision to make here. Do you continue to try to thread the needle as close as you can and support both football and basketball based off of the amount of money that you have coming in, knowing that neither is going to be as well funded as who they aspire to compete with? Or do you decide to push all your chips into the middle on one sport or the other and say, we are preparing for what we think will be a post-2030 future where either we feel we are confident that we can get an invite into the Super League, or we feel that we are not good enough to get an invite into the Super League, and we are preparing for a league where basketball is the primary driver of revenue for this university's athletic department. I don't know the right answer here. I don't think anybody knows the right answer here, but that's why these people are going to get paid a lot of money to figure that out.
Because in my mind, I think the right financial answer is football, because what drove conference realignment in the first place? It was football. Why did Syracuse leave the Big East for the ACC in the first place? It was football. It wasn't basketball. And when you look at it financially, like, as much as fans don't want to admit it, that's been the right move. Like, if Syracuse is playing in the Big East right now, I don't think they're doing as well financially. You're not having the 10-win seasons that you did in football, which ultimately are bringing in more money than what basketball would bring in just in general. But if you go to the average casual Syracuse fan and say, what is the most important thing to you? At least right now, most Syracuse fans just in general are going to say beating Duke in basketball and hanging with Duke and North Carolina and in those basketball, becoming a basketball blue blood again. And just like Syracuse, in my mind, the most financially secure thing for Syracuse is to be good at football so you can be a player in a Super League if it comes. However, Syracuse fans are going to want basketball more. And that's the needle you have to thread. It's and I'm pretty sure that's what the conversation they were having with they were having when deciding to leave the Big East. Our fans are going to want Big East basketball, but financially, for an overall financial sense, it made a lot more sense to move to the ACC. And like it or not, those conversations are happening. Those conversations are going to happen a lot quicker, especially since 16-team playoff probably is going to come very soon as well. So because of how fast this is all moving, you need to have this conversation now, and you have to move the trigger quickly. And also getting in a new chancellor is going to help that, because then you can decide if John Wildhack is the right person to help you move in that decision correctly, if you're going to go one way or the other. And if he's the right guy to help you lead the athletic programs into those decisions that are very, very important for Syracuse when we come to 2030, which is the target year that it looks like that all of this is going to come to a head.
Yeah, and I think, to kind of put a bow on the conversation here, I've been watching this dumb Paramount show called Landman while I'm at the gym. I'm on the treadmill. I need to watch something. This dumb show is about oil drilling in Texas. And a lot of the conversations is always, look.
An Emmy appearance from Jerry Jones?
An Emmy appearance from Jerry Jones, yes. And the conversation of can we burn $400 million for the prospect of getting $1 billion? And everyone's like, well, put a percentage on it. And it's like, you can't put a percentage on it because we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen when you actually start digging. And once you spend that money, you've committed that money to spending it, but you're all in at that point. And I think that's the challenge that we have here with football. Basketball is always going to be profitable for Syracuse in the sense that Syracuse is one of the few college programs, period, where if you were to eliminate television revenue, the way that Syracuse operates its basketball program with ticket prices, with alcohol consumption, with the on-campus arena entirely controlled by the university with no leases, Syracuse makes money off of running the basketball team. Entirely self-contained, no extra revenue needed. That's not the case with football, but being in the ACC means you get that giant TV check at the end of the year, and that giant TV check, even though football is far less cost-effective to run, that giant check at the end of the year makes the entire thing worth it, and you make far more money than you would make by having a basketball program. And so that's the equation that Syracuse is playing for, which is if we want that to continue happening, we need to have even more money spent on the football program in terms of coaching salaries and player revenue distribution. We need to have even more money coming in from donors to fund that player revenue distribution. And we need those lines to be consistent and be able to be tapped year after year. It's not like you can just ask somebody, okay, I want $10 million from you this year, and that's the last time I'll ever ask you. $10 million gets you a quarter of a national championship roster. It probably gets you half of a good roster if you're trying to compete in the playoff, just making the playoff every year. Like, the new math requires so much investment and so much consistent investment. But like you're saying, Christian, the payout is exponentially higher and far more lucrative for the university to fund everything else. And so if you're going to do that, like you're saying, the chancellor and the athletic director have to be in lockstep and have to have a strategy in order to ensure that that money comes flowing in on a consistent basis. And my hope is that we are going to go after somebody who has worked at a university that has had these conversations already, and we're not going to bring somebody in who's having these conversations for the first time.
Absolutely. And my objective with this conversation is to sway the fans who are hell-bent on making this a basketball school. Think about all the drastic NCAA rule changes, not just for specific sports, but in general, NIL, transfer portal. Those have been made with football in mind. And the other sports have just kind of fallen in line. What's the big betting thing that's happening right now? Gambling makes so much money. We all know this. Which sport makes the most money on betting? It's football and college football, which is why I think, in my opinion, Syracuse needs to go on the football train. And you hope basketball can come along for the ride. If it doesn't, the football money will eventually get there where basketball can go along for the ride.
The best case scenario here, Syracuse replaces Rutgers in the Big Ten and has an invite into the Big Ten SEC Super League as the New York representation that Rutgers was never going to deliver you. With the appeal that Syracuse has a massive alumni base in both Atlanta and LA to truly hit all coasts of the new Big Ten. When that happens, the basketball doesn't really matter in the Super League because they're not going to be operating under those rules, and Syracuse rejoins the Big East as a member for the basketball and the rest of the athletic teams to compete in. Worst case scenario, Syracuse doesn't get invited into the Super League. Football has to drop into whatever that lower subdivision is going to be of the non-Super League teams. The ACC falls apart, and Syracuse joins the Big East basketball, and basketball becomes our flagship program, with football completely falling by the wayside and the budgets being significantly tighter across the board. Like, at the end of the day...
And because of that, you don't get the players to fund your basketball program also.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I think people who want Syracuse to go back to the Big East basketball, get back to me in 2030. I think it's going to happen one way or the other. I think that at this point is an inevitability. What the difference is, where is the football program and how much money do we have to spread across all other athletic departments because of the influx of cash that football is or is not able to bring in at that point in time.
You got to be on the football train.
Look, we all watched Requiem for the Big East. It's been telegraphed for years, man. None of this is new information. What is new information, though, in our last few minutes here, Syracuse has brought in a large number of football transfers. I say large number just because it's a list of names. It's not nearly as much as Syracuse has lost in the portal so far. But
for the first week, that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. This is next upcoming week is going to be even more crazy. A couple of things of note, and then Christian, I just want your opinions on here. Umari Hatcher has decided to come back to Syracuse. He put his name in the portal and withdrew it. Makes me think that the coaching staff wasn't obviously forcing him into doing it. They're welcoming him back. Interesting decision making there.
He does have to apply for a waiver to play a 6th season. So
Yes.
that's why. So he has to wait on that, which is one of the other reasons as well.
There have been a lot of players that have come in across a variety of positions. As we mentioned, offensive line was not one of those. One of the areas that they really have spent some time restacking is the running back room. And I'm not going to lie, I really like the 2 running backs that they've brought in so far. So they brought in Ahmad Miller, who is from Jackson State, and they brought in Juwan Johnson from LSU. Both of them are about the same grade as Yassine Willis, according to On3. Both of them kind of represent the 2-pronged strategy that is being attacked here by Fran in the transfer portal. Johnson, coming from LSU, did not get a lot of playing time, but highly recruited, highly skilled pedigree. And Ahmad Miller is someone who was not highly recruited coming out of high school and performed at an extremely high level at a lower collegiate level. Syracuse is attacking both fronts on all their transfers, but I like that the running back room is kind of a representation of both, and I like that both are looked at across the industry as about the same level that Syracuse had coming into this year. And we were all disappointed when Yassine entered the portal. He has ended up at Kansas.
Yeah, my favorite player heading into the of that Syracuse got from the portals on the defensive side, it's University of Tennessee of Martin edge rusher Keyshawn Johnson, spelled the same way, not the same Jets receiver. And yes, that's Jets receiver first. We'll talk about how it went later. But UT Martian edge rusher Keyshawn Johnson. At the FCS level, he was a All-American, first-team All-American at the FCS level, and his conference defensive player of the year. At the FCS level with 20 tackles for loss, 13.5 sacks. How many times last year did we talk about Syracuse's inability to rush the quarterback and get sacks at the quarterback? That's a guy who clearly can get sacks. And so I think that's one of Fran's biggest gets in a portal because, yes, the offensive line of the trenches is very important, but the defensive line of the trenches is very important as well. And so that definitely helps with that side to rush the quarterback.
Yeah, he's one of the 3 defensive linemen that have been brought in so far. Jartavius Flanoy from Georgia State and Dylan Fontans from Maryland have also come in as well on the defensive side, on the defensive line specifically. A lot more names on this list. We'll do a full breakdown once the portal officially closes and we know all the names. But right now, those are just some of the names that we, the 2 of us are feeling really excited about. And hopefully next week when Steve is back, we have some offensive linemen that we can get excited about with Steve.
And because everyone wants to know, Syracuse did go to quarterback. Pretty good one as well. Kennesaw State quarterback Amari Odom helped lead Kennesaw State to its first ever bowl in program history, was a first team All-Conference USA player, 2,500 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 65% completion percentage. So at the very least, a good 1B quarterback for Syracuse to have. And essentially completing a trade with Kennesaw State because Ricky Collins goes to Kennesaw State and Syracuse gets Odom.
Yeah, Odom also visited Missouri, which, obviously if Missouri was looking for a quarterback to replace Bo Pagula, and if they were looking at him, that says a lot. It is going to be, again, I think that one of the big questions that we have here is where and how much are these quarterbacks expecting to play because of the Steve Angeli of it all. But it's nice to see that this kind of player ended up at Syracuse, because I do think that Odom, obviously a name in demand with a lot of teams looking for that move up instant impact that has worked really well so far across multiple levels.
See, Fernando Mendoza.
Literally, I was going to say, like, you can just list them all off. They're all there. I think one of the things that I'm just looking for right now, Odom has started for 2 seasons. He should have 2 more years of eligibility left, which is
yes, I have it in mind. He does have 2 years of eligibility left. Interestingly enough, he was a redshirt sophomore last year. Yeah, this is his 3rd school because he was a midseason starter replacement for Wofford in his redshirt freshman year, and started the final 8 games for Wofford in 2024. And in 9 games total with Wofford in his career, 1,600 passing yards, 7 touchdowns.
Yeah, so that's, and again, I think that kind of hits the timeline that we're looking at here, where they need bodies for spring. There's obviously no guarantee that Angeli is ready to go. Opening day of fall camp, no guarantee that Angeli is ready to go. Opening day of the season, it's Achilles. They're tough, and it's just a lot. But even if Angeli does come back and things go well, Angeli will be going to the NFL a la Kyle McCord. And if things don't go well, then you're competing with Angeli for the starter in 2027. So all of this kind of lines up with what I think is the narrative that Fran is probably telling the multiple quarterbacks who are taking the visits who have multiple years of eligibility available.
Absolutely. We know Fran wants to add another quarterback to the portal. I think that's going to be hard, and it's definitely not going to be at the same level that Odom is. But at very least, you got one of them that can be at least in case, because like you said, Andy, who knows? Like, yes, Angeli has been spotted without a boot, but like, who knows? Like, how close to 100% he is. Whenever you get to not even just the start of the season, but start of training camp.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Well, Christian, riding just you and me, we were still able to fill over an hour talking about different Syracuse sports. For those of you who have listened the whole way, thank you so much. We really appreciate the support. Make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast. It's going to help us trick the AI algorithm into expanding the Ottoman Empire. Thank you if you're watching this on YouTube. We are obviously uploading these podcasts to YouTube as well these days. Know a lot of you listen over there and enjoy. We didn't get to share our screen anytime, but when we do share the spreadsheets, when we do share the graphics, obviously YouTube is a much better viewing experience than the auditory experience of podcasts. Thank you so much to our sister site, nunesmagician.com. As always, you'll continue to see our work over there as well. And it obviously means a lot to us for their continued support of this podcast as well. Thank you again to Fans First Sports Network again for hosting this show on their network. As always, we're happy to be here and ready to go into another basketball season with the network. So like we talked about, next week we'll be back with Steve. We'll be hopefully talking about some transfers, hopefully talking about some decent to good basketball results, and hopefully a little bit less stressful this week on the internets. But I've learned to say that's just, it can always get worse, and it's never quiet, especially in these woods. But as always, go Orange.
Go Orange.